Welcome to How I Rent It, the podcast where we pull back the curtain on the tent rental industry. I'm Tony Ehrbar, the owner of American Tent, one of the leading event tent manufacturers in the U.S. As someone who got started in the event rental industry over 10 years ago, I'm excited to bring you the stories behind the people who keep events running smoothly. Was watching an episode of Shark Tank one night, had a couple of beers, and went on Craigslist, and in Green Bay was a tent rental business.
At the end of the day, failure was not an option. I'm going to do this.
Is this your first time on a podcast?
It is my first time on one, listening to one, seeing one. Yes, sir.
Each episode, we'll talk to inspiring event rental business owners to learn how they got started, the challenges they've faced, and their secrets to success. Whether you're dreaming of starting your own rental business or just love hearing great entrepreneurial stories with plenty of in-tent puns thrown in, this podcast is for you. Stephen has been through the rental industry for over 15 years.
And I was born under a tent.
This is the part where we're going to get into where we're going to have like VP of HR come in and just like okay the questions and answers. What does Ricky Bobby say? If you ain't first, you're last.
That's it. Absolutely.
So grab your coffee, your notebook, or just sit back and relax with a box of popcorn. Subscribe now on Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcasts, and join me as we uncover the journey behind the tent rental industry and how I rent it. Welcome to How I Rent It, the show where we dive into the world of rental business, sharing insights, lessons, and stories from people who've been in the industry. I'm your host, Tony Ehrbar, the owner and CEO of American Tent. Normally, I'll be the one interviewing guests and learning from their experiences, but the first episode, we're flipping things around. Today, I'll share my journey of how I got started in the rental business back in 2013. And to help me tell this story, I brought in Jake Lejoyce, who's the sales director at American Tent. Hi, Jake. How are you?
Good, Tony. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I like the background. You did that yourself, right?
I did, sure did. First project I worked on when I moved into this house.
Got it. So Jake and I first met 2015, probably, Jake?
Yeah, I think 2015.
Yeah, Jake was a young man. I was still an old man at the time, but I met him at a family bowling outing for my brother-in-law, and Jake was along, this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 16-year-old probably. So Jake and I met there, and when we started the business, he was one of the very first people we called to be on our crew at Elite Tent Rentals. So he'll actually have some fun stories to tell as we go along, being someone who was along for the journey. Like I said, first episode, Jake will actually be asking me all the questions on how I got started in the rental business from my first event, the biggest lessons I've learned, and what I'd do differently if I started over today. And there are lots of things on that list. We'll also chat about fun industry moments, advice for anyone thinking about starting a rental business. So if you've ever thought about launching your own tent rental business or just love a good behind-the-scenes business story, you won't want to miss this one. All right, so before we jump in, let's talk about why this topic matters and why we created the podcast. It can be daunting to start a business, so we want to help you hear how others did it. Much less painful to learn lessons from people than repeat them yourself. And then there's a lot of paths to grow a rental business, and so we wanted to just make sure you understood one size doesn't fit all. With that, I will hand the questions and the microphone over to Jake.
Yeah, let's jump right on into it. So first, Tony, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Yeah. So I own American Tent, which is a tent manufacturing business. I bought that in 2014. But before that, I had bought a tent rental business, and that was from the same person who sold me the manufacturing. And so we bought that business, Elite Tent Rentals, in 2013 from someone here in Green Bay, which is where we're located. I was living in Chicago at the time. And my brother-in-law, Matt, was running the business and running the crews and all the setups. And so we had one crew at the time. And then from there, we grew to three crews at the point in which we sold the business in 2019.
So take me back to what you were doing before you were getting this business off the ground. Like, what were you doing before starting a business?
I was a consultant in Chicago. So I had no interest in being an entrepreneur, or I didn't know I wanted to be one. And so I had a friend from business school who started a dog grooming business, or bought a dog grooming business, I should say, off Craigslist. And so I was getting burned out from being a consultant and kind of was watching an episode of Shark Tank one night, had a couple of beers, and went on Craigslist and found Chicago. There wasn't anything for sale. There was a Merry Maids maybe. And then in Green Bay was a tent rental business, and it just had this picture of kind of this sad looking tent and a pretty poorly worded little blurb on the side. And so I just reached out to the guy and reached out to Matt, my brother-in-law, and said, hey, what do you think about starting a tent rental business? And so we went from there.
So how did you fund your business initially?
So my grandfather had passed away 2 years earlier, and my grandma sold the cottage that he built. I had helped him build a part of the deck on the when I was a young kid, and she sold it for exactly the same amount of money that the guy was asking for. So kind of felt like my grandpa looking down on me and supporting me to start the business. So that's the money came from my grandma as a loan.
It's awesome to have family members like that in your
Yeah,
life.
I choked up a little bit when I said it.
So tell us about your first event and how it went.
Oh boy. So the first event was a frame tent we were setting up in a parking lot, and sent the crew out. We sent out with the tent, we sent out with the stakes, and Matt calls me and he said, we can't stake into the parking lot. And so if anyone knows, setting a tent up, you have to use some type of ballasting, either a stake or we have this great system called the Giphy ballast system, which is a water ballasting tool, or you have to use cement blocks. And so not being able to use stakes, we had to use cement blocks. They are tons. Each cement block weighs tons. And so we didn't have cement blocks. We didn't have any of the material handling, but it was like our first customer and we didn't want to fail them. So we got in touch with some local building supply companies and found someone who would take the cement blocks on site and off site. That costs a lot of money. We lost probably a couple $1,000s on that first job. So yeah, I wish I had known about cement blocks and not being able to stake into things. It just, you have stakes, you can stake into everything, right? Not the case.
There was some excitement and fireworks for the first one, but at least you learned that day, right? What was the biggest challenge you faced when getting your business off the ground?
The last story I think speaks to it, which is lack of knowledge and knowing what we were doing. The guy we bought the business from wasn't probably the most buttoned up on safety standards and all those things. And so it was learning how to properly set a tent up and do it safety. Obviously, a tent is a big kite. And so you need to be able to set it up safely. There are people underneath it. It's a lot of times it's a big day for someone, so you want to do it properly. So just education, I think, was one of the big things. I mean, now there's a lot more resources. ARA has a lot of good resources. Matra is an organization that does tent trainings and such. And then the ATA, the Advanced Textile Association, has a tent division. And then obviously not going to toot the American tent horn too much, but we have really great education resources, as you know, Jake.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes to installing a tent, I always tell people the most important thing you need to really realize is anchoring it properly, because that's what keeps the tent there, and obviously people are underneath, so safety is our number one priority always. Was there a defining moment that you kind of stood back and was kind of just realizing this was like when this was going to succeed for you?
I think a lot of times in businesses, it's that third year. So the first year, you don't know what you don't know, and it's just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And then the second year, you can really think about what you learned from that year, try to put some systems into place. But it was that third year, we started getting into some new markets. We focused more on wedding businesses, and that just, I think, was kind of the turning point for us. Yeah.
What is the one mistake you made early on that taught you a valuable lesson?
I think it was wanting to grow the business too quickly. So we went out and bought a lot of new inventory. We took out some equipment loans for it. And so getting all those equipment loans on the business kind of quickly meant we were paying interest and all those things on the inventory. So it made it a little more difficult from like a cash flow perspective, and being able to manage the finances of the business was just kind of the wanting to grow and being a little impatient, I think, and wanting to get to where I saw we could be a little too quickly.
Oh, got to have visions, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move into some questions about, growing the business and advice. So what strategies helped you grow your business from a startup to where it is today?
So I think the biggest thing was analyzing the market, looking at the competition and seeing where the gaps were. it's really hard to compete. There were, I think, 4 or 5 rental companies here in town or in the area. And if you're trying to go after the same thing that they're going after, you only can get 20%, 25% of the pie. And so trying to find where the gaps were in the industry, whether that's, for us, it was weddings, but for others, it could be graduation parties, smaller events. So I think that's really where where that happened.
What are the 2 to 3 types of events or markets you service most often?
So weddings was the biggest when we sold the business. Fairs and festivals, obviously, were big ones. So big city
Oh, yeah.
festivals, church picnics, and that kind of stuff. And then the last thing was grad parties and tailgate parties. So we live in Green Bay. You can see I think it's right here. Yeah, you can see my Packers helmet. So we did do a lot of stuff over near Lambeau for tailgates, and so some of those smaller events.
Go Pack Go, right? What kind of decisions did you make to enter them? Like, what were you thinking about? Obviously, I think when you get in some of these calls and you're looking at all these different events that are going on, what decisions did you make to enter them?
So weddings was the one we made the biggest decision, and that was, like I said, based on that analysis we did. The other ones were kind of came along as legacy customers, so the fairs, festivals. So those two we were already in, and the best type of customer you can have is one who calls you every single year and does an event every single year, because it doesn't require a lot of sales and marketing resources. The event, the pitfalls of the event, right? And so those fairs, festivals are probably a good bread and butter for something that's happening every single year. They're a little more budget conscious, which can be difficult. But then when you think about like grad parties, weddings, they happen one time. But a wedding, I mean, you could have a $10,000-$20,000 wedding, which is if a grad party is $1,000. There's a big difference between how much money you can make on those. Yeah.
I think too, when it comes to weddings, I mean, there's so many things that you can offer them too for underneath the tent, as far as like the lights, dance floor, draping. You can get pretty creative underneath the space. So I can see why you definitely wanted to target them and wanted, to continue those relationships. So how did you market your customers?
2 ways. We talked about brides. So wedding shows were huge, because you can roll out the red carpet, show the types of items you have, show what differentiates you from your customers, or from your competitors, I should say. Also having a showroom at our location. So when we first started, we had kind of this central area. I don't even remember if it was offices or we just used it for storage, but we tore everything out. We opened up the space, we put in nice flooring, and we brought in all of our products so customers could see those. I think that's really important for something to want to touch the product, see the product, especially for it's an important day in people's lives if you're talking about weddings and grad parties.
Yeah.
And then Google, I mean, that's where people find you. If you have a grad party you've never known you needed a tent until you have that event. So really focusing on writing good articles and getting out over SEO, and getting people in the door to come to your website, having a good website, and then having good reviews. I mean, people want social proof now of your products. So we do have 7 steps to starting a tent rental business. And in that, you can see some recommendations for how to think about like SEO marketing, and driving people to your website using Google, and I mean other search engines, but it's really Google.
So with like all the ins and outs with setup, inventory, clean and sense, etc., how did you manage your finances and ensure that you are profitable?
I'd say the biggest thing is not making mistakes, or not making mistakes twice. That's all about setting up procedures. Packing a truck is stressful in the morning. You have 4 or 5 people sitting out on the dock. And so it's very easy to forget a pole, or it's very easy to forget a fitting. And if you get 2.5 hours away and you're sitting at a job site and you're missing this one fitting, that is 2.5 hours of sending someone back, all the gas, sending the person back. And oh, by the way, for those 5 hours, you're paying the entire rest of the crew. So that things can spiral out of hand very quickly if there's not systems and procedures in place. I know that's something near and dear to your heart. That's Jake is the king of writing standard operating procedures and things for the sales team at American Tent.
Everyone's got to know the play, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you decide what new products or services to add to your rental offerings?
I think the big thing is just listening to customers, understanding what they need, not trying to guess, but rather understanding their needs, and then going to big trade shows. So, like I mentioned, the Advanced Textile Association has the tent rental division, and they do every other year a big tent show. They have tents out. Everyone has tables, chairs, all the products you could buy. And the tent conference the other year. Matra is another organization who does a big kind of trade show. ARA, which is the American Rental Association, that's the biggest show for rentals. And so going and seeing all the products that are sitting out there.
Are there any trends you are seeing in the industry right now?
So we've noticed a lot of people moving from kind of an adjacent industry into tent rentals. So bounce houses and companies who do a lot of like bouncers and that kind of stuff are a lot of what we see there. And because you're already going to the site, you're already going with a crew, you already have a truck going. And so you've paid all those kind of fixed costs to get there. And so if you can have a tent with you and be able to set the tent up, that's another $500,000 that goes into your pocket without really additional fixed costs, travel costs, and all those additional items. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the big trend we've seen. We do go to another show called IAPA, which Paige and I always debate. I think it's the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions or something like that. But it's the coolest show. There's AI or AR and all this stuff, but there's a lot of bounce house companies who come through that show and are really interested in trying to expand what I'd call it their share of wallet for an event.
I'd certainly agree 100% with that. On top of that, like just general event venues that, wow, I have this open space. Why don't I look at, getting a tent and learning how to put this up so I can have another offering for my customers? So I would definitely agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
So to kind of help our listeners, any common or fatal mistakes you see other businesses doing, right now that would kind of help them out?
I'm going to give all mistakes that I made. But so one of them, bad customer service. I don't think that was something for us, but bad customer service is really easy to lose a repeat customer. And we talked about those being a good moneymaker. I'll call it crappy inventory. Not taking care of the inventory you have. And that was one problem I know, Jake, we had was our crews would go out. We had a tent manufacturing business. And so they thought, well, I'll take the tent out. We'll set it up quickly. We always can just make ourselves new inventory. Well, that's still a cost, right? And so we always preach at American Tent, and I know the really good rental companies do this, is taking really good care of your assets, right? You want to take good care of the tent tops. You want to use drop cloths. You want to use frame jacks for setup. It's just, if you can get 7 years out of a tent versus 2 years out of a tent, maybe after year 1 or 2, you've already paid off the asset. And then all the additional jobs on top of that, the only cost to you from like a variable perspective is labor. And then you have a tent that's used for weddings for 4 years. You kind of retired into fairs and festivals. And then it goes into, I don't know, like drag races as kind of a quality C tent, hopefully in year 6 or 7 rather than year 3. And then I think not thinking about safety. Like we talked about that earlier, but I mean, that's like priority number 1. The very first thing that you think about is safety. So making sure you're calling Digger's Hotline, making sure you're ballasting the tent, making sure you're understanding weather and how those things all relate. Because things can derail very quickly if you have an event where a tent collapses or and harms people or property, God forbid.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yep. What advice would you give someone who's thinking of starting their own rental business?
First off is do your research. I jumped in just kind of straight in. So doing your research. I mean, I did research, but make sure you're doing that. I think the people who are most successful to start are the ones who started as a side hustle. And Jake, you talk to a lot of customers who it's their weekend thing. It's a husband and wife and his cousin who are doing the setups. And so you keep your costs low, you keep your risk low, right? And then as you've proven it out, you get your name out in the industry. Lots of times in like year 2 is when you start to see like, okay, this could become a real thing. Year 3 or 4, probably year 3 is where you start to see, hey, I can make money, I can pay myself. Because I mean, having that day job is a fallback for income. And then, I mean, you're putting costs into the business when you get started.
That's good advice. All right, let's move to some fun and interesting rental questions.
Yeah.
So the very first one, what is one tool or piece of equipment you can't live without?
I'm having a really hard time with this. So I'm going to say my top two, and then maybe I'll let you fill in if there's any other ones. So I'd say a stake driver, not
Yes.
having to throw the stakes. And I mean, we called ourselves the Hogan crew, right? You get out there with
Hmm.
with your big sledgehammers, and that's a quick way to get hurt, to throw your back out. It's really slow. So having that
Yeah.
stake driver is important. And then I think a drop cloth is a really simple thing, and we sell them. That's how you're going to get good life out of your tent, rather than putting the tent down on grass that was recently cut, putting it onto cement and pulling it over the cement. So I think those are the two things I can't live without, and I have a feeling I know what your answer is going to be.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with both of those. A couple actually. So the other one for sure that I couldn't live without would be a frame jack for sure. Especially even if it was like a smaller tent, and the rental business, sometimes crew members aren't as reliable. So having that as a extra backup certainly helps. And then obviously those larger tents, you got to have them. And then the other would actually be just a stash of pins, and whether it's the center console or on the side, because I always felt safe with having a bunch of extra pins on hand for sure.
Yeah, yeah. You're stealing from the next question for the pins. I
Oh,
have my answer,
jumping
which isn't
ahead.
the same. I know. Frame jack, just for those who don't know, so it is basically a large masted system that has a crank, and it helps lift the tent into the air. And this is for frame tents. So there's two
Right.
different styles of tents, but frame tents are built out of like a structure, and there's a tent that goes over the top. Think of like a really large pop-up tent. Right, with the structure inside of it. And then a pole tent has the center poles, looks kind of like that circus tent. It's tensioned rather than sitting on top of a system. But for frame tents, the bigger you get, it's really hard and on the staff, and it's pretty inefficient to like lift this thing up in the air. And when you're 16 years old, you're like, oh man, it's shoulder day, right? Like I'm gonna lift this up. But when you 44 or whatever I am, you're gonna hurt yourself. So frame jacks are a great resource. Um,
Hmm.
so then, to answer the thing found in my glove box, zip ties. I
Oh
still have zip
yes.
ties. I find them in coats. I find them in like my current car. So yeah, zip ties are like MacGyver tool for me.
Other thing I would definitely add too is always some sort of like magic eraser, like especially if for
Oh
some reason you see a
yeah,
stain that pops out of nowhere, especially when it comes to those higher end like wedding events. Like, all right, let me get
yeah.
that out quick. So that would definitely be another one for me too.
I panic when I see magic erasers now. Like it just brings me back to events where the bride is
Yeah.
called and she's like, "Hey, there's one spot on the ceiling over there that is a little bit of a mark. Could you go fix that?" And oh, by the way, I'm 2 hours away, and the event is today.
Oh gosh, let's bring you back,
Yeah,
huh?
yeah. I probably also had replacement light bulbs in my center console as well
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
for the
Those
lights,
are
or fuses for the strands of lights. There's just a lot of little things that slowly accumulate over time.
Yeah, definitely. So tying into that, because I'm sure there's a lot. What is the most memorable event or project you've been a part of?
Yeah, you and I were talking about this before. I think all the ones kind of surrounding the Packers were kind of fun. I think we
Hmm.
did a wedding for a Packers player one time, and it was kind of like a hush hush affair. I don't think I had an NDA, so I can say that, or at least not. I don't remember who it was, so that's fine. And then, I mean, there were a lot of cool events at Lambeau. Being able to kind of have your tent in the like shadow of Lambeau. We worked with
Yeah.
ESPN for a while and would put tents up for some of their Monday night broadcasts. And so it was cool to be able to like text a friend and be like, "Hey, turn on Monday night countdown on ESPN and go look at one of our tents."
Hmm.
So did you have any, or I might have stolen your Packer one?
Yeah, that one event we set up, I can't remember the name, but it was like a big like grill off where I think we set up like two 40 by 80s in the parking lot at Lambeau, and we came
Yeah.
back for the takedown, and there was just a bunch of leftover like pulled pork, ribs, and I just remember me and the crew just getting a ton of bags, and it was just like, oh sweet, this will last me for a couple days, free some of it. So that's one thing I don't forget. I don't know, it was just cool experience, and I myself like to grill and learn new things, so that was probably the most memorable for me.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with free meat. I mean,
Right,
that's a general rule.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and by the professionals, so it was really good. So that would
Yeah.
probably be mine.
Yeah.
So what was like the most unusual or surprising requests you've received from a client?
This is where we might get
Probably
into
some
the part.
crazy ones.
I was going to say, this is the part where we're going to get into where we're going to have like Sarah, who's our HR, VP of HR, come in and just like, okay, the questions and
Yeah.
answers. So we had a group for it was like a bridal event, maybe it's a bachelorette party. Yes, bachelorette party. And when they called, we're talking through the event and they're like, so how much weight can the center poles hold? Like, what?
Oh boy.
How much weight
I
can
know
the
where this
center
is
poles
going.
hold?
Oh boy.
And I told her, I said, I don't think I can answer that question accurately, but I said, you can make a decision if you think, maybe let him try it out. But I said, I don't think I can give you a safe answer and feel liability wise good about that.
Yeah, not a good idea.
No.
So what's the most rewarding part of running a rental business?
So for me, and this is the same for American Tent, it is making a difference in the lives of the people who are on your team. So at American Tent, empowering people to be the best version of themselves, like that's our mission at American Tent. And so in my mind, it doesn't really matter what you're making or what you're doing. It's that you're pouring into those people. And I'd say we didn't have a mission at Elite Tent Rentals at that time, but that's kind of the gist of what makes it for me.
Have you had any unexpected success or funny moments in your business journey?
Yeah. We're going to do a bunch of takes on this and see again which ones stick. This is a Jake story. Now that I talked through that one, maybe it gets cut out by Sarah. Who knows?
Yeah.
So another one, and then I'll let you share your story. So my brother-in-law was out driving on the highway, and they were driving through a construction site, and they got the big trailer behind him. It's a big open trailer, and it's the lanes kind of like start to get smaller, and there's one cone that's sitting a little too far out, and so he tried to move over. It clipped the cone, and the guys all tell the story this way, so I'm positive it happened. The cone gets up in the air, does a bunch of like flips, and lands perfectly like straight up and down in the trailer, in the back of the trailer. Like they get back to the shop and it is sitting in the back, and we couldn't bring it back out onto the highway, so it did sit as like a little reminder of that experience in the corner of the warehouse. So yeah, that's my funny moment, I guess.
So I definitely do remember that one. I would say for me, I mean, there's been a lot for sure. Probably the most just out of the blue, never thought would happen. Going back earlier in the conversation, when it goes, you got like 4 different crews loading up trucks. It's a big day, middle of summer. Obviously, tents are going up like crazy, coming down like crazy. So I think we were running late this one morning. We were just kind of putting some last minute things in the back of the truck, and one of our employees, I don't know if he tossed or I don't know what he was doing, but he I think he threw a sledgehammer in the back of the truck, and it bounced off something and smashed the back window. So needless to say, we had a job to do, and so I drove the truck with the back window blown out. So I'll never forget that one, just because it was just one of those weeks too. And it's like, all right, what's going to happen now? Or what's going to happen next? So that one always sticks out to me.
Yeah, and the as the owner, you're always the last one to find out about this.
Exactly.
Like weeks later, you go out in the parking lot and you're like, I thought we had a window in the back of the truck before. Oh boy.
Yeah. And I also liked if it was ever a very long day where we'd get back at like, I don't know, 11 p.m., jump in your office and have some Taco Bell and debrief the day. That's something I always remember too.
Yep. Love me some Taco Bell.
Oh, absolutely. What's the biggest risk you've taken, and how did it turn out?
I'd say Shivari chairs, and you probably are going to have like a really negative reaction on the screen. Those chairs are a beast. I mean, chairs normally stack, right? And so you can bring 50 of your like standard white folding chairs, or you can bring 25 of your like resin chairs or whatever. Shivari chairs don't fold down into anything. They're just chairs, right? And so you stack them like 4 high. And so anytime we would do a job, we bought them and we're like, oh, great, we're going to put them in the corner of the warehouse. Well, the amount of time it took to put those into the truck and keep them like safe in the back of the truck without dinging and denting, like you need like covers between the chairs, and it just there were a lot of work, and and we just couldn't charge enough at first to cover some of those costs. So what we learned was that you get an enclosed trailer, and that is the Shivari chair trailer. So we actually ended up selling our chairs to someone else, and they did that for us and took care of the chairs. But having an enclosed trailer for those chairs and just having to move them in and out at the event saves so much time. It can be a padded trailer. It's very specific to hold the chairs in place and that kind of stuff. So big risk, and it turned out we figured it out, but not after damaging some chairs and probably losing money on some jobs.
Yeah. That also reminds me, remember those big farm tables?
Oh God.
Those were another
brides.
beast.
Yeah, brides love them. You just
They're
need
awesome.
to find you got to find a way. Like, it has to have folding legs, and I think
loading them.
Going to the ARA show now, there's a furniture offering is like so much better and so much more travel friendly and durable. So, but yeah, farm tables, man, I hadn't thought about farm tables in a while. I kind of want to throw up in my mouth.
Bring it back. All right, what's the most bizarre thing you've ever found left behind after an event?
Yeah, we found some pretty bizarre clothing. I won't go too much further. I will let people's imaginations take over there, but we had some like weird, bizarre clothing that was left behind.
Use your imaginations.
Use your imagination. That's the How I Rent a Podcast.
All right, so let's transition. We're gonna do some rapid fire questions that are non-rental specific. So the first question, Tony, if you could open another business completely unrelated to tents, what would it be?
I've had 12 years now running a business. And so I'd really like to be a business coach. There's so many lessons I've learned, which is why I like doing this podcast. It's like an opportunity to share experiences with people, right? And so I think being a business coach would be pretty great.
Yeah, I totally see that. If you had a theme song that played every time you entered a room, what would it be?
Don't Stop Me Now by Queen. I just really like that song. I mean, it just tells a fun message. It gets you like amped up, right? I'm sure one of your answers is gonna be some type of like, I don't know, wrestling song of some sort. What's yours?
Yeah, gosh, I would say unrelated to the wrestling, I'd say Sad But True by Metallica or Can't Stop by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I don't know why. It's just more of the beat, the two, not necessarily the lyrics, but it's just like, you're ready to enter the room,
Gets you amped up. Yeah. If you ever call in and get Jake on the phone, talk to him about wrestling and talk to him about anything outdoor, hunting, fishing. Like, I mean, if he could come into work in camo, he probably would. So that's how you'll be able to talk Jake into a discount, maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
The discount double check, right? Jake from State Farm?
Discount double check. That's awesome. Oh, this one's one of my favorite. What is your go-to fast food option if you are running between jobs?
I mean, Taco Bell, always Taco Bell. They're so easy to find everywhere.
Absolutely.
And you just go and you go by the crew, like everyone, you just get like tons of tacos, right? And just for the crew. I will say, if I had the choice, and I know you like this because it's on your way to work, Taco John's is a Wisconsin only thing, and they're like slowly fading away. But they're meat and potato burritos, man. Like I could eat those. I could eat those for days. Yeah.
The potato olays never get old. All right, now I'm getting hungry, so we better move on to the next one. What is your favorite or most gifted business book?
6 Types of Working Genius. This book, and we've talked about it a lot. So I won't delve too far into the details. The author is Patrick Lencioni. He has written a bunch of really great business books. I'm sure I have several back on the shelves over here or wherever it is. But he writes them in parable format, right? And so it's a story about a business, and then the business has this issue, and then they build a framework to kind of address the issue in their business. And so his most famous one is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which really great book as well. But 6 Types of Working Genius is about allowing yourself and other people in the organization to be in their areas that bring them joy, that bring them energy. American Tent, one of our values is find your joy, right? You want people to want to be at work, to be energized and not get home
Mhm.
every night and like collapse on the couch with a bottle of Merlot, or whatever you would drink.
I'd have to do a Cabernet.
Yeah. So I just think it's a really great book. It's my most gifted book that I'll give to someone. Side note, two other ones real quick. Start with Why by Simon Sinek is really good. Another gifted book for me that talks about how to grow a business and how to think about why you exist, and that informs your like how you do it and then the what you do. That's a really great book. And then Traction by Gino Wickman is another gifted book. It's a operating system for small businesses. So it's called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS is the system, but absolutely something to look into for any small business who's growing.
Maybe you could join Aaron Rodgers' book club on the Pat McAfee show.
Oh, that's a thing? I can't with Aaron Rodgers anymore. I'm sorry, Aaron, if you're listening. You remember when he did that darkness retreat? And we were thinking about putting up like a social media. Well, we did, right? Yeah,
we did.
Social media posts about blackout tents that you could go into and have your Aaron Rodgers experience. I think we even tried to tag him, but it was he didn't respond. Yeah.
If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, getting a message out to millions of people, what would it say and why?
Just because you fail, it doesn't make you a failure. And I think the important message in there is I failed is very different than I'm a failure. And Brene Brown is one of my favorite authors, and she talks about this. But if you say I failed, it can elicit the emotion of guilt, right? And guilt's it's a healthy emotion. You don't want to live in guilt all the time, but that's something I think is different than I am a failure is shame. That's about me and who I am. So that for me is something that as an entrepreneur, that was like the turning point for me, was detaching failing from being a failure, because you are inevitably going to fail in some level, in some amount every single day. And so it's a matter of detaching that so you can take the failure and you can learn from it and you can get better.
Great. I love that. All right. We got two more now. So if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
I told you earlier, it feels like a cop-out answer, but Abe Lincoln. I mean, he had to deal with a country that was in so much chaos and crisis, and what he did for the country. I just was at Gettysburg this last year, and we did this really great battlefield leadership event, and you walked like up the hill where all the fighting happened. But I just would love to learn more about how he thought about that. And then additionally, he suffered from depression. And I suffer from depression quite a bit in the past. I'm a lot better now, but just learning from him and kind of talking through how that impacted him. Because I mean, at that point for him, he had like therapy wasn't a thing. Talking about mental health wasn't a thing. Mental health drugs, all those things weren't a thing. And so mental health is one thing that's really important to me. I mean, I will talk about it until I'm blue in the face, just normalize it that, I mean, a lot of us suffer from a lot of things, and it's an illness. It's like having diabetes, right? It's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to talk about and to so you can kind of shed a light on the darkness. But so yeah, Abraham Lincoln. Do you have an answer? I'm assuming it's a football player of some sort. Vince Lombardi, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, Vince Lombardi definitely would be one. Just his mindset to win, his message on teamwork and, just doing your job to be the best person that you can be on and off the field. And I think what I really like about him is just success. I mean, the guy was very successful. He was a hard worker, and he was a good person. So I would say Vince Lombardi for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to see Jake as a dad and coaching like kids sports. So you're going to be like the greatest coach for like the kids. That's just like Vince Lombardi felt like I knew that was going to be the answer. Just
I hope so. All right, let's move on to the last question.
Yeah,
this is a good one. I'm sure you have a lot, but special talent or most interesting thing about yourself.
So I was on The Price is Right. I did get on stage. I did spin the wheel, and I had a $1,200 espresso maker that I won by bidding $1 more than the person right before me. So was on The Price is Right. I tried out for American Idol. I did not get onto American Idol. And then I've been visited 53 countries at this point. So love traveling, do a lot of traveling over into Asia, and other places.
Yeah. The other thing too is if you ever need a place to go get some really good food, Tony's your guy.
Yeah, I don't think I failed you yet. I'm like very
Never
nervous
have.
about like we went for those dumplings at one time at Din Tai Fun in Vegas. I was
Yes.
just in Taipei for another business that I have. It's a sustainable fabric business, Renegade Plastics. If anyone wants to go check it out, but we were in Taipei and I went to like the original Din Tai Fun, and it was like, I mean, heaven. We sat for like 2.5 hours and just
Oh
ate
yeah.
dumplings and more dumplings and more
Just
dumplings and
just food coma. It was awesome.
just took a huge nap. Yes.
Awesome. Well, that's going to wrap up all the questions on everything we discussed. So, Tony, I'll bring this back to you to close
Yep.
everything out.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, thanks so much for being the host for the episode. Next episode, maybe we'll like bring you on like McAfee does with like AJ Hawk or whatever. You can be my AJ Hawk.
I love it. I love it. I'll get a
yeah.
bookshelf behind me next time and a cigar.
Perfect. So the plan going forward with this is I have a lot of really great friends in the industry who built their businesses in very, very different ways. And so what we're going to do is I have a queue of those folks who are going to come on, do some of the first episodes. I mean, these guys have been doing it for 15, 20, 25 years. They have multi-million-dollar businesses, but they all started out from something small. They've all learned thousands of lessons at this point. And so I'm really excited to bring a lot of those folks on. Our very first guest will be the one, the only Peter McVeigh, who works for us and does a lot of our product development, a lot of our education materials. I mean, you bring him to a trade show and everyone in the rental industry knows him. Everyone wants to come see Pete at the show. And so we'll be bringing Pete on. He's a hoot. He looks like ZZ Top, and he's got some pretty interesting stories to tell. So thanks for listening to How I Rent It. Do you want to start your own rental business? Visit us at americantent.com/tent rental. And download our detailed guide on 7 steps to starting your own tent rental business. We've had a lot of customers talk to us who were Bounce House customers previously, who've started using that guide, and it's been really helpful for them as they're thinking about getting into tents. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with friends. And then follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. If you want to be a guest, email us at marketing@americantent.com. So thanks for listening to How I Rent It. Until next time, keep things intense.